Bang! Neeves Knives, I'm Jared with my lovely wife, Kara, and today we're talking about the top 10 toughest knife steels on the planet. We're also going to talk about the 5 best tough knife steels that you can have on one of your knives. We're going to deep dive into each individual steel, talking about what type of edges they take best, what type of applications they're good for. Let's get into it. So I'm going to show you guys some examples of some knives that feature some of the steels from this video, but we're not going to talk about steels like 8670, 5160, 52100, or like 80 CRV2. And the reason why is because, yes, these steels are extremely tough, but they don't have any of the other attributes that we want in a knife steel, like edge retention or corrosion resistance. And the steels that we are going to talk about do have similar toughness, if not more, with the other qualities like edge retention and corrosion resistance. The steels that I just mentioned, what they would be good for, like lawnmower blades, axes, hatchets. 80 CRV2 was made for combat steel. So things that just don't require anything other than toughness.
Can I ask you a quick question?
What's up?
So why is it that the toughness of the blade doesn't make the edge retention stay strong? Like, why isn't that the same thing if it's so tough? So
toughness is the edge's ability to take impact. So think axe, right? An axe's ability to take impact and not deform or chip. Strength is its ability basically to bend or pry. Like, how strong can it withstand, or how much can it withstand prying before it bends and won't go back to true, or it snaps. Edge retention is the edge's ability to resist wear. So it basically is its ability to stay sharp, because an apex is acute and, you know, it abrades off slowly, making it dull. Number 10 for the toughest knife steel, so this is the 10 spot, is 8CR 14 MOV or 13 MOV, basically the same thing. Now, this is a very affordable lower end steel. The edge retention is going to be very low on it. It's basically going to be like a 3 out of 10, but the corrosion resistance is really high at a 7 out of 10. The toughness is a 6 out of 10. So it's above average. Think about average is going to be basically like a 5. So it has high toughness with low edge retention and good corrosion resistance, making it a decent steel for affordable pocket knives. You don't want to spend too much on this steel, and as far as sharpening it, you want to, it does take on a good fine edge. It absolutely will take a super fine edge, and the thinner the geometry, the longer and better it will cut, of course. However, it's, you know, it's a steel that's not going to hold the best edge. So if you do put a high polished edge on it, which it will take just fine, it's not going to hold the bite very long. It will eventually get slick. So if you care about the toothiness, you might want to go with a medium grit with this steel. The edge angle will depend on whatever the geometry of the knife is and how thick it is, because, you know, depending on that will depend on the stability of the edge, you know, with whatever angle you put on it. You know, if it's super thin, you don't want to put a super low angle, unless if it's going to require no toughness at all, right? Because remember, it's the ability to resist chipping on the edge with impact. And if it's super thin with a super low angle, it's going to be brittle. Next, at number 9 is M4. This is the Spyderco Gale Bradley, an M4 steel. Now, M4 is an incredible steel. It has 6.5 out of 10 for toughness, 6 out of 10 for edge retention, and 4 out of 10 for corrosion resistance. So the corrosion resistance, the ability to resist rust and things like that and patina, is going to be a little bit lower, but, you know, it's not none, so, you know, it will resist it a bit, but it's going to have really good edge retention and really good toughness. So this is going to be a great steel for a lot of applications. Now, M4, in my opinion, you typically wants a toothy edge. You, in my opinion, I think between 600 and 1200 grit is where you're going to want to keep M4. M4 seems to slick out if you, and it doesn't seem like it has the best edge retention when you take it to too fine of an edge. So keeping it around the medium grit area seems to do best with M4. 4. Now, as far as what applications you want to use it with, it's just a great pocket knife steel. You're going to find them on some Kershaws, and Spyderco uses it. There's a bunch of companies that do use it, and it is considered a difficult steel to work with as far as grinding and stuff like that. So it is an awesome steel, but can be a little difficult for companies to work with, so it can lean towards the more expensive side. Number 8, Magna Cut. Magna Cut is an American-made steel, and every single one of these knives right here are USA made. I do have even more knives in Magna Cut. Magna Cut's been very popular lately. It is basically the newest steel to the market, at least as far as when I'm filming this video, and it has proven to be a great, or an incredible steel, I should say, for knives. It was developed for knives. So this is a steel that has incredible corrosion resistance. It's basically a 9.5 out of 10 for corrosion resistance. The edge retention is a 5 out of 10, and the toughness is a 7 out of 10. It's going to be very similar to 4V steel. Kaiser has a bunch of knives in 4V, and they do a decent job with it. And a bunch of other companies, Spyderco uses it. Now, 4V has very similar everything except for corrosion resistance. So it basically has the same toughness, the same edge retention, but it is only a 4 out of 10 for corrosion resistance. 4V is an incredible steel, by the way. I freaking love 4V. It takes some of the sharpest edges on the planet, and it loves a polished edge. It will take a low angle polish. Look at this. Just this one alone, man. This thing is so ridiculously sharp. If you want to feel hyper sharp, 4V is a great steel to work with. Like I said, takes low angle edges very well, and you can go all the way up to 5-10,000 grit with no problem. It'll also take a good medium grit edge. Now, Magna Cut steel, like many other steels, most steels I should say, if not all steels, it's going to be highly dependent on the HRC of what type of finish you should put on it. If it's heat treated between like 63, 64 plus HRC, even the mid to higher side is 62 plus HRC, it will take great low angle polished edges and hold it extremely well with an insane amount of bite. It gets very sharp. It's a great steel to work with. However, when you get it to the lower side of the HRC, it's not going to do very well with the polished edge, and in that case you're going to want more of a medium grit edge, 600 to 1200 grit. Now, Magna Cut is a good steel for basically every type of knife, whether it's a fixed blade, because in the fixed blade, you're just going to basically do thicker geometry with maybe a mid-range HRC, 62 HRC basically. That way it can take a lot of impact and be very strong for things that you would do with a fixed blade. But it's also a phenomenal steel for pocket knives, where it will hold an incredible edge, get incredibly sharp, and have the most corrosion resistance you can pretty much get out of all knife steels. There's a couple that are a little bit more, but it is definitely in the top 4 places for corrosion resistance. So it is an incredible steel for pocket knives, folding knives, fixed blades, even probably chef knives it would do good with. Great steel. Number 7, Nitro V. Companies are using Nitro V quite a bit right now. A lot of different companies are using it. One, because it is an incredible knife steel that you can get for a relatively affordable price. This is the Kaiser Drop Bear, now in Nitro V with thinner geometry and a slimmer handle. This is the Praxis button lock in Nitro V with aluminum scales, incredible knife. And then this is the Vision FG, one of my all-time favorite budget knives. What a really cool knife. So for its toughness, we're talking 7.5 out of 10 for toughness. 3 out of 10 for edge retention. However, I honestly think it's more of a 4 out of 10 for edge retention, to be honest. And then 7 out of 10 for corrosion resistance. I feel like it has a lot of similar qualities to 14C28N, which we're going to talk about here in a second. But it's an incredible steel that, one, takes a very, very, very sharp edge. You know, if it's heat treated well at a good HRC, this is a steel that you can take all the way up to 5,000 grit, no problem, and it is screaming sharp. It takes low angle edges very well because of its, you know, higher toughness mixed with its edge retention. It has the ability to do very well with low angle fine edges, you know, which one thing that's going to lead to that is going to be the edge's ability to have toughness and its ability to have good wear resistance. When you get that good balance in there with a nice hard HRC, then it has a really good edge stability, which is what's going to determine how acute you can get that apex. And Nitro V is a phenomenal steel for all applications, whether it's chef knives, pocket knives, fixed blades, hard use knives. It's a good steel all the way around, especially because you can get it so affordably. Next is number 6, and that is Kware, one of my all-time favorite knife steels. Kware is an amazing, amazing steel. This is the Spyderco PM2, and this is a Steve Kalari custom. This is a prototype we're working with a double harpoon and Kware steel. Now, Kware, the reasons why I love it so much is one of my all-time favorite steels is because of its ability to take and hold a fine edge. It takes some of the most ridiculous sharp edges you've ever experienced, and it has the ability to hold that sticky sharpness for a very long time. It doesn't have a very long working edge, so once that stickiness goes away, the working edge quickly follows behind it. But you know, its ability to just keep a super sharp edge for a long time is incredible. So its toughness is a 8 out of 10 in toughness. So 8 out of 10 in toughness, 5 out of 10 in edge retention, and 5.5 out of 10 for corrosion resistance. So it has decent corrosion resistance. People wouldn't call it a very corrosion resistant steel, but it's going to be about average. But its edge retention being a 5 out of 10, that's great edge retention. That's really good, considering most steels that you see on knives, you know, they're going to fall way under that, you know. So Kware is an incredible steel, but its toughness mixed with its edge retention just makes it to where, my goodness, does it just take incredibly sharp edges and hold it very well. Another thing is that because it is so tough and has good corrosion resistance, it's good in a lot of applications, and you can bring it to a high HRC, which increases all those things I mentioned as far as edge retention, sharpness, and so on. Now, it also has the ability to take, you know, more of a mid-range HRC if you're wanting it for abuse and hard use and you know, toughness and stuff like that. This is a great steel for fixed blades if you want a hard use knife, but it's also a phenomenal steel for pocket knives if you want a nice tough steel that takes and holds razor sharp edges. As far as the ink, the grit and the finish you put it on, I say that the Kware does best between 3,000 and 5,000 grit, maybe even a little bit higher. Now, if you're going to be using it for impact and stuff like that, you're not going to want to put a low angle edge on it. And that goes for any steel. Any steel that you want to be able to do impact with, if toughness is the most important part, then you're going to want a little bit of a higher edge angle, depending on the geometry. You're just not going to want a super low, very, very sharp edge. You're going to want more of a tougher edge, which would be a higher edge angle. And in that case, I would say put a medium grit edge on it. But what an incredible steel. Number 5 is LC200N steel. LC200N steel is the most corrosion resistant knife steel we have. There's a couple that fall under the same amount of corrosion resistance, but this is a 10 out of 10 for corrosion resistance, meaning this is the perfect steel for saltwater applications or any type of applications where you're going to be around a corrosive environment. So Quiet Carry likes it so much that they actually even use it for their steel liners, because their knives are always made to have the highest corrosion resistance. So they're as rust proof as you can get to have a steel. So their liner, if you look closely, it is labeled LC200N. Same thing with the steel lock bar insert they use. So this is a titanium liner with a steel lock bar insert made out of LC200N. And the reason why is because it's an 8.5 out of 10 for toughness. 8.5 out of 10 for toughness, 3 out of 10 for edge retention, and 10 out of 10 for corrosion resistance. So this is an incredible steel if you're looking for toughness. Now, if you're looking for edge retention, it's still decent. It is a steel that holds a good edge. It still does take and hold a good edge, but it's not going to be the highest edge retention steel. Personally, for me, I think LC200N does best at a medium grit. It'll take a fine edge just fine. You can absolutely put a polished edge on it. However, you know, it's not going to hold the bite for as long as you'd like. So in my opinion, if you're going to want to get the most out of the edge, I say 600 to 1200 grit would be your best edge. Now, like I said before, if you're going to use it for toughness, for fixed blades, impact, anything like that, you're not going to want to put a super low edge angle. You're going to want something a little bit more on the higher side. And then if it's specifically for cutting performance and you want to bring out more edge retention, lower the edge angle down a little bit, and you should get a little bit more cutting performance, or a lot more cutting performance out of it. But LC200N, phenomenal steel. This is a steel that's going to work great for applications that are going to be in corrosive environments, where that is one of the most important factors to you: toughness and corrosion resistance. If that's important to you, like say being a fisherman or anybody that works around saltwater or anything like that, LC200N is exactly the steel you want. Now, we have not gotten to the top 5 best yet, so this is just the top 10 still. And number 4 is 420 HC steel. 420 HC is a steel that Buck uses quite often. It is a very tough steel, but it doesn't have some of the other qualities we want, like edge retention. So you have 420 HC, which is a 9 out of 10 in toughness. If you go to 440C, which is basically a souped up version of it, it's only an 8 out of 10. However, the edge retention is only a 2.5 out of 10. Very low edge retention. The corrosion resistance is like a 7.5 out of 10. So it has great corrosion resistance, but it does not have great edge retention. 440C is like a 4.5 out of 10 for edge retention, but the 420 HC is only a 2.5 out of 10, which is what we're talking about here. So is it a good knife steel? I would actually say not really. If you're wanting something, and trust me, I know there's going to be a lot of people screaming down in the comments, I've been carrying a Buck for 30 years and it's still sharp. I've never even sharpened it. I know you haven't. But it's not going to be the best steel considering what we have today. Today we have incredible steels that hold incredible edges, that still have similar toughness and everything else. Yeah, they'll cost a little bit more. So if you're wanting something on a super budget and edge retention isn't important to you, then 420 might be just fine for you, or 440C. 440C actually has good edge retention. So I would say skip the 420, get the 440C. You're going to lose a little bit of toughness because it's going to have an 8 out of 10 for toughness, you know, the 440C. So you're going to lose a little bit of toughness, but it's not going to matter. It's still an extremely tough steel, but it's going to hold an edge a little bit better. As far as the edges it takes, it actually does take a very sharp fine edge. So you can put a screaming sharp mirror polished edge and it takes it very easily. However, the issue is that once you start using it, the little microscopic teeth that lead to your bite, that are basically your micro serrations, they will chip and break off and make the edge slick, and it will be slipping out of cuts. So, and that's just due to low edge retention. So, you know, I personally think it's gonna do you better with a medium grit edge if you're wanting to make sure that you hang on to a bite so that it doesn't slip out of cuts. I would go 400 to 800 grit, but like I said, you can go all the way up to, you know, 5,000 grit. Just don't expect it to hold that fine edge very long. Applications it's good for: budget knives, knives that you don't want to pay a lot of money for, knives that you are possibly going to beat on and abuse, and if you lose it, it's not going to matter. It's probably a steel that you're going to probably not even really sharpen very often, because it's going to be more of like a throwaway type of steel, unless if it's 440C, then in that case, then, you know, it's good. Don't get me wrong, there's some good knives made out of it. Like Buck does a good job with their Boss heat treatment, so that's going to be basically the prime examples of it is going to be from Buck. Buck does do a good job with it, and in that case, you will see better performance out of it. Number 3 is 14C 28N blade steel, which comes from AEBL, which is what this custom Steve Kalari is made out of. Very thin geometry. Look at that. Look at that. So thin. Now, that's the beautiful thing about AEBL and 14C. 14C is like a souped up version of AEBL. AEBL was originally designed for razor blades, and it was made to heat treat rapidly, made to be a very tough steel that works great with very, very thin blades. So that's its best quality is, one, its ability to be heat treated very well fast, and its ability to take incredible sharp edges and hold them with very thin geometry. So the toughness on 14C is 9 out of 10 toughness. So very, very high toughness. And the edge retention is basically a 4. I say a 4 out of 10. A lot of the things label it a 3 out of 10. I give it a 4 out of 10. It's edge retention tests that I've done on it. It's always done better than it's probably labeled. And I think the reason why is because I think a lot of the tests that were done on 14C that gave it the 3 out of 10 were done at like 56, 57 HRC. Now, a lot of the steels that I've tested have been 59 to 61. So like this one right here is 63.8 HRC in AEBL. And I think in that case, it just holds a far better edge. Corrosion resistance is 7 out of 10. So very high corrosion resistance. Some of the companies that are using it and doing the best job with it are companies like Civivi. Civivi does an incredible job. KUBEY's doing a good job with it. Kershaw was the original company to start using it. It was a Swedish-made steel, so you're going to be able to find very affordable USA-made Kershaws using 14C 28N, and they do a good job with it, and they do good geometry knives. Now, Civivi does the same thing. They do really, really good geometry knives that are very thin, very slicey, and also just incredible knives. If you want a very high quality knife in 14C, then you're gonna wanna go with like a Civivi, like I said, a KUBEY or a Kershaw. There's other companies that are using it too that are also doing an incredible job with it. It's an easy steel for them to heat treat. However, this is my favorite thing because it is my all-time favorite budget steel, all time. Nitro V is very close, in my opinion, to the 14C as far as my favorite. They're very similar. Remember, I said that earlier. But the reason why it is my favorite budget steel is, one, obviously it's affordable, so that's what puts it in a budget steel, but its ability to take and hold a fine edge. This steel, like I said, it was designed for this micro thin geometry, and it just, like when you have very thin geometry, the knife's going to be able to cut much better, right? The edge retention is going to go up. Now, the toughness isn't going to be as high, but because it is such a tough steel, it does very well with slicey knives. And then another thing, it is a steel that does very, very well with a fine edge. You can sharpen this between 3 and 5,000 grit, and it's going to be some of the sharpest edges you've ever experienced. This is, and most people actually agree with this, like the sharpest edges they've ever gotten have been on 14C, AEBL. There's a couple other ones that you know are right there, but there's like a group of like 8 steels that are just like the steels that take the sharpest edges out of all. And 14C is definitely in that camp. And it might not hold as long as some of the other steels that I would mention or put in the same category, but it holds it good. It still holds it well, and it has great corrosion resistance. So because it's so easy to sharpen, it's so easy to maintain, it takes a really good edge no matter what grit you put on it. You can put a toothy edge on it, 400 to 600 grit. You can put a super fine edge, 3,000 to 5,000 grit. It doesn't matter, it likes it all. Now, what applications will it be good for? Everything, literally everything. I have chef knives in that steel, not even this one, I have other ones too. It does really good with hard use, fixed blades with thick geometry, stuff that you're just gonna absolutely abuse to death. Does good with that, and it does really good with super thin, slicey pocket knives, or even tougher use pocket knives, or even razor blades. So literally it goes well with all applications. Number 2 is 3V steel. Basically the toughest steel on the planet for knives, damn near. It's very close. The number 1 spot is tougher, but this is one of the best knife steels you're going to get with extreme amounts of toughness. This is from Phobos Knives, and I have already used it for some harder use, and my goodness, does it work well. Kaiser does a decent job with their 3V, and again, 3V takes an incredibly sharp polished edge. I think 3V actually holds an edge better with a finer edge. So if you're wanting to get the most out of 3V for edge retention wise, then I say you should put a low angle polished edge or low angle fine edge. Anywhere between 2,500 and 5,000 grit will be really good. You can go higher than that if you want to, but it takes a very, very sharp, very toothy, very nippy edge that you can easily maintain. It strops back really easily, hones back really easily. Now, if you're going to use it for more harder use applications and edge retention might not be the most important part, then obviously don't do low angle polished edges, right? So it just depends on what you're trying to use them for. This is the new Smolt, and it's in 3V steel. As you can see, it's just a little compact little folder, that you can use a little tougher than you might otherwise because of the steel being so tough. 9 out of 10 toughness. 9 out of 10 toughness. Now, the edge retention is a 4.5 out of 10. So it has good edge retention, but it's not going to be, like the highest edge retention steel. It leans more towards the tougher side. However, 4.5 out of 10 is damn good edge retention. Like you're gonna think, like S35 VN, S35, I would say like S35 would be like a 4.5, 154 CM would be like a 4.3, and 14C Nitro V would be like a 4, like a 3.8 to 4. So it's right there in a really good edge retention area. The corrosion resistance is only 5.5. So people always complain about its corrosion resistance, but to be honest, like it's not bad as long as you take care of it. Yeah, it's not something you're gonna probably wanna use in salt water. You're definitely not gonna wanna use it in salt water, but if you're just carrying it as a basic pocket knife and you're not constantly using it for corrosion things that are corrosive, it's gonna do just fine. Keep it dry, keep it oiled, you won't have no issues with it. Now, like I said, I prefer low angle polished edges on my folding knives with 3V. Now, if it's gonna be a hard use knife, I will go more with a medium grit, something like, 400 to maybe even like 800 grit. And it does very, very well with that. But that's going to be because I'm going to be using it for impact and things like that. Granted, it will still be very, very sharp, even if you don't put the most lowest edge angle on it. Like say a 22.5 degree edge bevel, something like that, if you're wanting toughness. It does depend on the thickness. Like if it's super thick, it might even be a higher, like 25 degrees per side. But I typically sharpen it about 17 degrees per side and 15 degrees for like really slicey pocket knives, because like I said, it takes such an incredibly sharp edge and it holds it very well. And like I said, it drops back so easily. It is one of the most popular tough steels for knives. People absolutely recommend it almost the most for fixed blades. So this is going to be a phenomenal steel for fixed blades. That's where it's going to probably do the best, is going to be fixed blades because of its toughness. However, I actually like it for folding knives. I know it's not the best application for it because it might not make sense in a lot of ways, because with pocket knives, the most important part is wear resistance and edge retention and sharpness and the ability to pass through materials. But because of the type of edges it takes and so on, and how easily it strops back, man, I personally like it for folding knives. I know that might be even a little controversial because people would be like, it doesn't make sense to have it on a folding knife. I like it. So, but yeah, there you guys go. Let's get to number 1. Number 1 is not a steel I actually recommend for knives, but it is Z-Tough. Z-Tough is the highest toughness steel on the planet for knives. Z-Tough is a 10 out of 10. The only other steel that's a 10 out of 10 that I can think of is 8670, which we talked about earlier, that we're not going to talk about because of its attributes not being very good for knives, which Z-Tough is very similar to. It only has a 2.5 out of edge retention, horrible for knife steels, but if you're using it for hatchets, machetes, axes, anything that's going to be only for impact, hitting, prying, and stuff like that, Z-Tough is phenomenal for those things. Just do not expect it to stay sharp. My top 5 favorite tough steels are, and this is just my opinion, but my top 5, what I think are the best, my favorite number 1 place for the toughest steel is going to be Kware. I think Kware is one of the best steels on the planet when it comes to knives, and it's an incredibly tough steel. So this is probably my favorite tough steel. I love that it takes nice high HRC heat treatments. I love that it holds such a fine edge and that it takes some of the screamiest, sharpest edges I've ever experienced. And number 2 spot would be Magna Cut. Magna Cut is one of the most well-rounded steels I can think of. And in fact, this might even be better for you. You know, any one of these knives or steels I'm going to mention, you could flip-flop any which way you want. They're just the best in my opinion. Magna Cut, super tough, incredible corrosion resistance, and great edge retention. It holds such a good edge. It takes a really good edge. As long as it's heat treated well, this is an amazing steel and one of the most well-rounded steels I can think of. 3V, toughest steel on the planet when it comes to knives, second to Z-Tough. And for knife steels, I would take 3V over Z-Tough every day of the week. So 3V, just such an incredibly tough steel, and with that, you know, that's what makes it amazing and makes it stand out of the crowd. It's going to be great for fixed blades and hard use knives. Number 4, 14C28M. While it might not hold an edge as long as some of these other steels or some other steels, you know, that do exist, it is a steel that's extremely well-rounded for the value. I personally am very happy anytime I see 14C, even if it's on somewhat of, you know, a little bit more expensive knife. You don't want to spend too much for it, but, you know, it's a steel that, like I said, because it holds a great edge, because it's so easy to sharpen and so easy to maintain, this is a steel sometimes I can keep going longer than some other super steels just because of its ability to hone and strap back. You know, with just a couple very light passes on a stone, I can hone 14C back many times over. And because it takes such low angle edges, same thing with Kware, because it takes, and Magna Cut and 3V actually, all of these steels, because they take such low angle edges, that makes it even easier to hone, maintain, and strap. So 14C, love it on everything. And then last, number 5, Nitro V. Nitro V, super tough steel, great corrosion resistance, great edge retention, and like I said, very similar to 14C, not as tough as 14C, but I like it on basically the same applications. You know, especially if it's heat treated, you know, at a pretty high HRC, then it's going to be phenomenal with super slicey geometry knives, and it takes an incredible edge. Again, you know, it takes a fine edge, toothy edge, whatever edge you want to put on it, you know, just depends on the edge angle and the application. But those are my favorite. Now, with saying Magna Cut, I would also put 4V in that area. You know, you could even put it right here and then knock this one out and put it at number 3 and then 4, because 4V is one of my all-time favorite steels as well when it comes to tough steels that take an incredible sharp edge and stay very sharp. So I'm pretty much putting those together. Like I said, they're very similar to each other. The biggest difference is just going to be corrosion resistance. So if corrosion resistance doesn't matter to you as much, then 4V might be the way to go. And if it does matter to you, then, you know, you're going to want some Magna Cut. But there you guys go. There are the top 10 toughest steels, toughest knife steels on the planet, and my top 5 best tough knife steels. Work hard, stay tough. Until next time, peace.